And also, please make sure to mute your microphone, but we'll also be spending some time questions and for everybody to take the floor. Again, happy welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining. My name is Levi, or Levi in Dutch. We are here together with my colleague Gerbrand, and we'll be hosting this session for you today. I am the CEO at Deepmap. We are based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, so that might explain my stone cold English, or there's even an official term for it, Dunglish, Dutch English. But I hope that you'll forgive me. So today we're going to talk about the trends in volunteer management. Feel free to jump in the chat. It is on the below on the right. And I'll ask everybody to pop a quick message in there to introduce yourselves to the rest. So let us know who you are, where you work, what you do, what your favorite food is, and if you have holiday plans for December. Because if we blink twice, it's already the end of December, so it's very, very quickly. I'll also be sharing my screen because we have prepped a presentation for you today, not just listing all of the things that we see across the board and across the sector, but also some examples and best practices. Dorica, lovely to have you on the show today. Here it is. All right. Gerbrand, is everything working in terms of technology?
Everything seems to be working.
Lovely. So as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about the trends. Well, there are a couple of hundreds of trends if you really dive deep into all of the research within our sector, taking into account everything that's happened the past couple of years and is happening right now. Well, we chose to boil it down into a couple of overarching trends that we see within volunteer management. Quick introduction of the team. It's not me and Gerbrand alone. So as I mentioned, we are Deepmap. We are a team of happy world changers, philosophers, marketeers, impact managers, and we came together in 2017 because we wanted to make volunteer management easier, more accessible, more inclusive. We do that by offering technology. So we work with CVS partners across the UK, but also in the Netherlands and basically all over the world. So we work with these organizations who facilitate volunteer matching between organizations on a regional level. We also work directly with charities to help them out with volunteer recruitment and retainment. And we still manage our own national database of volunteer opportunities in Europe, where we have helped over 3 million volunteers find their way of giving back to their local community. So from these partnerships that we have, we sat down with the team and we did our research on what is it that we see, what is happening in the sector today. Quick note to Gerbrand, if there's a question in between, I cannot see the chat right now, but if there's something, just let me know and jump in. If we look at the sector today, I think we're at living in an exciting time, not always for the most positive reasons, but I think everybody understands and feels that volunteering is changing in many, many ways. And I think it's important to take that into account when we talk about trends. So we see a trend as something that is a development over a longer period of time. It could be that if we name something a trend, it could also be that it's much more of a hype, a short-lived moment, or an uptick in something. But in most cases, the trends will be recognizable for many of you because it's been going on for a longer period of time. So if we talk about volunteer management, we tried to define it. It was kind of difficult. So we said, let's get together and make a handout. So we'll also be sending this to all of you because it might help you explain to other people what you actually do. Most of you work with or for volunteers. And if you try to explain what you do, we always ask our partners the same question. And they look at us and go like, what don't I do? So it's a lot from assessing the needs of volunteers to matching them to placement to training them, volunteer appreciation. So it's a lot. And we need to acknowledge the fact that if we work within this sector, there's always a lot going on. So there will probably be also a couple of trends that we completely missed in the list. But you can also add them to the chat if you want to throw that in front of the group. Looking at last year, it's almost we're almost at the end of the year. I read an article yesterday that said, well, you have effectively 20 days until the end of the year, and that is approaching very, very quickly. So I guess that everybody is rushing to get things done before the holiday recess. And I also guessing that you're probably working hard on your plans for next year. So hopefully this might help you, provide you with some input. So in the past year, we've seen that on the recruitment side, it has been changing rapidly, and it has been ever since the COVID pandemic. And there's a difficulty in between the balance of supply and demand. So if we look at many research done within the sector, we see this overarching trend that there's a decline in the amount of volunteers. You could debate that, choose not to do so at this point, but I think everybody understands that the main challenge is to find and keep volunteers committed. If we look at volunteer retainment, the experience that volunteers have within organizations, the tasks that they do, is becoming increasingly more important because the measure in which they are engaged, committed, satisfied with the work that they do will ultimately determine if they want to stay on and be a committed volunteer. We also see that new forms, and I put them in quotes because they're not that new anymore, but new volunteering formats are a reflection of how people want to make a difference in this day and age, in comparison to what it was 5 years ago. So we see the emergence of more skills-based opportunities, remote opportunities, flexible volunteering, but we'll also dive deeper into how we actually view that and what that means for you. Also, we saw major leaps in terms of technological advancement. I think everybody understands that there is like an uprising in AI going on. If you look at the images on the left, this is what we created using AI. We used Midjourney, and we tried to come up with pictures that showed happy volunteers at work. You can, a quick tip, if you want to determine if something is generated by AI, you can usually look at the hands because it's still difficult for AI bots to generate hands. But there's been a major leap in terms of technological advancement, making it much easier to make volunteer management scalable, whilst at the same time, even we as a technology supplier acknowledge the fact that technology isn't the one-shot solution to everything. Lastly, we've seen that in order to maximize the potential and the impact that volunteers have, we see that the shift is going much more towards education and engagement of volunteers. So we've seen partners of ours come up with volunteer academies where they provide dedicated training in order to make them more successful within volunteering and make it more happy volunteer experience. So a couple of these insights will probably be the same for you. If there's any more, please pop them in the chat. So we distilled the trends from this, and I think we had a long list of around 15 to 20 trends. We put some of them together, but this is where we boiled it down to. And the number one is flexible volunteering. Flexible can mean a lot of things, but I will show an example later on where Community First Yorkshire, I believe, really did a good piece on what does it actually mean to be and offer flexible volunteering. But why do we see this shift from more traditional volunteering to more flexible approaches to volunteering? It's basically because the preferences of volunteers have been changing in the past couple of years and will continue to do so. So more and more research is coming out that shows that especially younger people have a different view on how they want to volunteer and how they want to commit their time and skills. And this is something that is undeniably should be part of your strategies for the next couple of years. Second one is, as I mentioned, that a positive volunteer experience is the main driver for satisfaction, commitment, and ultimately retention of dedicated volunteers. So it's not just about getting them in, getting them placed, getting them to work, but also focus on how they view the experience overall and try to see what you can improve upon that. Then we see the new types of volunteering emerge. Skills-based opportunities are growing rapidly across the sector. More and more organizations that work with volunteers try to come up with different ways in which they can offer volunteering opportunities. We've seen a rapid increase in, for example, remote volunteering ever since the COVID pandemic, because simply we didn't have another choice and we needed to, but that also showed how versatile the organizations can be when they need to. But new types of volunteering are better aligned with the unique interests of and lifestyles of volunteers, especially with the cost of living crisis. I believe the NCVO Time Well Spent research stated that the number one reason why volunteers don't volunteer more, like the biggest threshold, is the amount of time they have available. Also, another interesting trend is that we see that more and more organizations, not just volunteer involving organizations, but also infrastructure organizations, they work together with partners to see if they can come up with a more effective and efficient way of organizing volunteers. And they also instantly gain access to more skills, resources, and expertise. And we'll show a couple of examples later on. Lastly, we did an entire session a couple of weeks back on impact measurement, because I think in the next couple of years, it will be crucial for everybody to be able to analyze and demonstrate the true value that volunteer programs and volunteers create in order to secure future funding. And we've seen this with many of our partners that receive funding. Most funders are now asking much more than before, what is the impact that you're making and how can you demonstrate that? So this will be a crucial point towards the future. I know that the person in this picture looks kind of like me, but it isn't me. So I'm not that flexible, but I try to be as much as possible within my work. But I am 37, so flexibility in terms of my body is not my strongest suit anymore. If we look at the context of volunteering, we see that there is increasingly a more flexible, accessible, and inclusive approach to volunteering. I think especially inclusion is one of the bigger topics within volunteering today, and it has been in the last couple of years already. because many organizations still struggle to find ways in how to make volunteering more inclusive. But nonetheless, we cannot escape the fact that we need to start looking differently at how we work with volunteers. This is the top right image is an excerpt from a study done in the US. Historically, it's one of the countries with the highest amount of volunteers. And I think across many countries, we see that there's a steady decline in the amount of available volunteers, making it more necessary to look at different ways in how you offer it. And I think there has been a 23% drop in amount of volunteers. And this is also the point where I said in the beginning, I think you can debate this on many fronts. So I'm not on the doom and gloom side of things like, hey, we see a steady decline in volunteers and alarm bells going off. I think that also looking at partnerships that we have, if you're able to change the way in which you offer it and still be able to support your core services, which is crucial also, we see that there's a way to increase the engagement and commitment you have with volunteers. And we've seen many examples with organizations successfully doing so. Another study by the EESC, I should have written down the entire acronym, but it's linked in the presentation. You will receive all links afterwards. It's a study in the European Union on new ways of creating a volunteering infrastructure. And surprisingly, they said, well, it's not so much about new types of volunteering, but much more about third-party involvement and how to support spontaneous volunteering. And I personally believe, but this is on a personal note, if I'm looking at ways to volunteer, usually the first thing that I do is ask around with friends, look in my direct environment, what can I do? So I volunteer at my local sports center. I volunteer at the kindergarten of my son. And these things are all not captured in many research that's being done. So people find ways to organize their own volunteering, even if it's not involving themselves with an organization or a volunteer center. People find ways to do so. So this study actually states that if you want to secure the future volunteering, you have to start looking at working with third parties. In this case, it could mean working with companies that are increasingly more investing in their corporate volunteering programs, or service learning, where you work together with universities that offer their students ways to give back within their local community. So these are all ways in which you can still capture the momentum and the force of volunteering and getting out of the way in terms of being the bottleneck, but be much more of a facilitator in that sense. The third one is they also advise to tailor your marketing, your recruitment purposes, much more to the availability and preferences of volunteers and less on what you need as an organization. And this is actually where it kind of, I'm not familiar with the English word, but there's a small conflict there. Because what you need as an organization is not always what a volunteer wants. So we need to strike the right balance between what people want and what you need as an organization. Lastly, if you work for a volunteer center or infrastructure organization, we see that it's increasingly becoming relevant to facilitate everything that has anything to do with volunteering within your local community, and acknowledge the fact that people and organizations have much more self-organizing capabilities and wishes to do so. So there's a true chance for you to step into that role even more. An example of this is, which I found is from the British Red Cross, where they tailored their marketing specifically to preferences of volunteers. there's a link in here. So view the page. I think this is a great example of how they tailor it. So they have an emergency volunteer pool where you can find specific, or where you apply as an emergency volunteer, tapping into the development of people wanting to give back, but not do that on a regular basis, but reach out to me whenever you need me. They also state many, many reasons, including videos. What is it like to volunteer? What are the benefits for me as a person? How do I apply? What happens when I apply? So they really, really pay attention to how they involve volunteers, even when they start their journey with them. It's a great example of how you can tailor it to preferences rather than stating, this is what we need in terms of volunteers. This is what you need to be able to do. This is what the qualifications that you need to have, because that scares off many, many volunteers. Another example where a partner of ours, Spark Somerset, works together with third parties. So it's a CVS in Somerset, UK, and they've gained increasing more questions from local companies saying, hey, can you organize volunteering days for us? And they stepped into the role of facilitating those collaborations and making sure that they can guide those experiences for volunteers and companies and the organizations that they work with. So there's also a link later on, take on how they actually frame, in this case, employer-supported volunteering or corporate volunteering, but it's a great example of how they try to work together with as many third parties in the region. Lastly, this is a Dutch example. It is the Volunteer Center in Utrecht. So they work together with hundreds of organizations in the region, trying to support them with the recruitment of volunteers. But they also work together with a local university that has thousands of students, and they're all trying to looking for what we call social internships. So the Volunteer Center stepped into the role and said, well, we can offer a subset of set opportunities that are suitable for, in this case, younger volunteers and students. So this is also a great way in where they find this collaboration and working together with this university to make it easier and more accessible for younger people to start volunteering. Lastly, this is another third-party involvement. This is Annabelle in the Netherlands. She started her own initiative, like a social movement, and she started working with challenges to spread kindness. So it's a great example of how the self-organizing capability of people. So if they want to do good, they find ways to do so. So we're starting a collaboration with her to see if we can share these challenges across our network and make it more enticing, more fun for people to give back in a certain kind of way. So this is also, these are the initiatives that I truly like, and this is what I'm always happy to see these kind of things. Look at all the great things that are happening. So going to the second trend, if we look at what I mentioned is the positive experience, that's leading for committed volunteers, keeping them in. Like a happy volunteer is a volunteer that remains at your side. So we've all seen the time well spent research, probably by NCVO, that stated that overall, most volunteers are very satisfied with the work that they do. But this is an overarching research. So I would absolutely advise you to do your own research and inquire with your volunteers how they experienced when they volunteered with you or through you. So we see that more and more tailored approaches occur in what we call the volunteer journey. So you acknowledge the fact that when people are starting out as a volunteer, the way they need guidance is much different than people that already have been volunteering for a couple of years now. So we're starting to see more tailored approaches to how organizations work with volunteers in training and education, feedback loops, like ask them after each volunteer experience, how did you, what can we improve, in order to learn from it and provide better guidance and support. And I think that if you look at the scalable element in volunteers, try to recruit them, place them, match them, and get them to work, there will always be a place in terms of tailored approaches for people that cannot find their way in, for example, a digital setting, or people that have other preferences depending on their background. So these guided volunteer journeys are a great way to align what you offer with what they need. And I think top down right, there's been a specific focus on people with a different ethnic background in terms of their commitment to volunteering. And I found it quite interesting that there's one article that states that people with a Black, Asian, or other minority, ethnic minorities, they volunteer less often, while another article says that they are most likely to volunteer during the cost of living crisis. So I think it just shows that the whole inclusion bit, we haven't nailed that yet. So this is the British Heart Foundation. During my search, I really love this example about how they tailor this volunteer experience. So I put a link to their volunteer strategy in the presentation, and this is one example where they specifically state how they view the volunteer experience and what they do in order to make it as a nice experience as possible. Other ways they try to improve the experience of volunteers is how they frame the opportunities that they have. So they have a way of they are constantly looking for volunteers to help out in their shops. But instead of asking for a shopkeeper or a shop attendant volunteer, they dubbed it Operation Elf, where you can apply as a volunteer and take up this nice activity within their shops. So it's a really great way and a creative way in how you frame your opportunities, and at the same time make sure that you give the best experience possible. This is something that we've been working on. It's not fully done yet, but this is an example of the guided journey that we see and that we also work out together with our partners. I come from a marketing background, and I don't know any different than organizations always focusing on the best customer experience, and they map out all the different steps, all the different spots and places where they have ways to engage their customers, or in this case, volunteers. So this is an example of how you can also map it out for yourself. So what are the crucial touch points where I need to be clear, where I can make a difference in terms of communication, support, and guidance. When this is done, we'll also send it on for you to be inspired by. This is another pair of us. This is the Volunteer Center in The Hague. So they have opportunities for people live in and around The Hague. So it's anything from skills-based opportunities, small tasks, organization roles like trustee roles. So it's a very wide range of things. But they also saw that there's an increasing demand for volunteers to receive training and support. So they came up with this, what they call the Volunteer Academy, and they provide workshops and training, how to deal with aggression, how to work with a computer, how to become a more resilient volunteer. And I think this is an example of you're not just placing or getting volunteers to work, but you also try to inspire them as they work with you. Then, if we jump into the new type of volunteering, to meet new interests and skills. I think what I mentioned, flexible volunteering, this is an example by Community First in Yorkshire. They listed the PDF on their website to explain what flexible volunteering is. And I especially like the bit where they said it's not just a flexible approach to volunteering in general, but it's a flexible approach to the role, to the person, to the time and place, to what you expect. And I'm not saying that I see volunteering become a more like every experience is a tailored one, because we still need people to fulfill certain roles. But I think the right balance needs to be struck between what you offer and what you need, and what a volunteer is looking for. Another example that has been increasingly growing since the pandemic is the amount of virtual or remote volunteering. Befrienders or telephone services is a big one. And I believe around 23% of all volunteering in the UK is currently done remotely or virtually in a sense. Especially for younger people, the preference for remote volunteering opportunities is growing. Another form of like flexible volunteering is micro volunteering, where you offer small tasks. Usually you would have a bigger task done by one volunteer. More and more organizations are breaking them up into smaller different tasks, or have the flexible approach to people where, for example, a group of people can take up one opportunity or one list of tasks to do. So this is also an example. And I have another example. Well, there was a CVS that said, well, we don't call it micro volunteering, we call it volunteering for busy people. And I really love that. Just down to earth approach to things. Like, we understand everybody's busy, but these are things you can still do if you have a busy life. Lastly, skills-based volunteering. This is also mainly visible in the collaborations with companies who more and more are trying to organize volunteering as a way for their employees to develop skills and provide them with ways to give back to the community. So this is another topic that is vastly increasing in the last couple of years, to learn certain skills and offer them. An example of a remote volunteering opportunity that I found, and I really, this blew my mind. So you're even able to become a remote volunteer for the Smithsonian Museum in the US, where you can help transcribe documents and help them out in getting that information to the public and securing it. And I truly love. So if you have a preference for history, then this is the way. This is the place to be. So try to look at ways in how you can engage remote volunteers, because there are many people that are looking for ways to do this working from home. Love this example. Another example, this is more in the terms of micro volunteering or task-based volunteering. This is Oma Soup. It translates to Grandma's Soup. So it's a nonprofit that is out to combat loneliness amongst elderly people. So you have ways to bring soup to elderly people living in the neighborhood and engage with them in a conversation on a regular basis. You can join a cooking day, and after that, the soup is being brought to these elderly people. So you can just hop on these activities whenever you want to. So if you have a busy period, then you can limit it to one time, and otherwise you can always jump in. So they are active in multiple cities, in multiple countries. And I really love this example on how to make it accessible. So if you're trying to do something, just spend a couple of hours and then no expectations elsewhere. But if you like the experience, people tend to come back and make it more of a regular thing. The fourth trend, where I mentioned that more and more organizations are looking at ways to collaborate with others and work with third-party organizations. This is an example that we do in Amsterdam. So this is where the Volunteer Center works together with the city council and local companies, around 150 plus right now, where they offer specific tailored volunteering opportunities to these companies and to the employees working at these companies, because they understand that corporate volunteering is structured differently than other types of volunteering. So there are different preferences for people. Usually it's group-based, and they try to provide those opportunities and giving them this place to go to. And this is a pilot that we've been running for 2 years now, and we've been steadily growing this. And I think towards the future, more companies are willing to give back and spend their time and skills. And it's up to you to decide and form a way in which this will be possible. Also, I think in terms of collaboration, we've been working with many partners that are active in certain regions, but I wanted to show how we view the ecosystem of what we call volunteering. Most of this is based on our technology because we are a technology provider. So if we look at volunteering platforms where everything comes together, where organizations can post their roles, volunteers can apply to a wider range of these opportunities, we think that the future is much more connected platforms. So having working together with neighboring regions to see if you can offer the same opportunities to the same group of people. So this will enable organizations not to compete for a single volunteer, but find ways in how to smartly collaborate with them. So it's not just regional platforms and organizations working together, but also involving local community corporates, local grassroots movements, people that come up with their own challenges, them a place to come together and really form that strong community in volunteering. This will also enable campaigns, big campaigns like the Big Help Out in the UK or other places to collaborate more and really make a stand in how to facilitate the next future of volunteering. Lastly, as I mentioned, I think this is a big trend, and I personally believe so. My background in data has taught me that if you're able to showcase the true value of volunteering, it will make it increasingly more easy to secure future funding. Having said that, I also think that we haven't cracked the cookie on impact measurement yet, but we're making great strides towards being able to do so. I think that has something to do with not just counting the amount of volunteer hours and calculating a monetary value for that. That is something that is one way to do it. But also, if you're able to show and showcase the difference you've made within your local community, within people's lives, I think you've struck gold. And we've done an entire session on this. We'll also send over the link. And if you have joined that one, this will probably sound familiar, but it's about striking the right balance between quantitative analysis and qualitative stories. And I think if we strike the right balance, we're able to do so. And I think this is an example of Go for Hearts. It's the CVS in Hertfordshire. We've been working with them for a couple of years now. And they constantly share the milestones that they have working with volunteers. Because this is not just part of celebration and acknowledgement, this is also ways to showcase the value that they facilitate, the value that they support and create together with organizations and volunteers. So if you don't celebrate volunteer happiness at the end of the year, then view this as your reminder to do so. This is an example in terms of like an impact report that I really like. Of course, the link is available. This is the impact report from Spark Somerset, who have a great way of showcasing the value that they have within their county in different regions, amongst different topics, the journey that they've had in the last year, and also explaining to their local community and volunteers how they viewed the last year. So if you're looking for a prime example of a volunteer impact report, then this is what to do. Take a look. Also, if you haven't seen this report yet, I think this is one of the better pieces on impact measurement in the last couple of months. This is a report by Dominic Pinkney. He is the CEO of Works4U, and he wrote a big piece on how to calculate the monetary value of charity trustees. And also, I believe last week was Trustees Week. So this is a very lively topic. So if you want to know more about how to get started with impact measurement, and this is the first place you should go to and pick up some inspiration. So to conclude, we view the next trends in volunteer management in a more flexible approach, creating positive experience and acknowledge that they are leading in order for volunteer retainment. Try to find how you can tap into these new types of volunteering, collaborate more with third parties for improved impact, and organizations making sure that they can demonstrate volunteer value to secure future support. So I think this is it for me. I'm well within time, but I always know that if I jump on my talking wagon, I just go on. So I haven't seen anything in between. So I'll stop the screen share right now, and I think open up the floor for any questions that there might be. If you want to pop them in the chat, please do so, or you can just open up your mic and do so. Mira.
Hi. Thank you. It's really good presentation. Thank you for sharing some of the key links as well. My question to you is regarding in your experience, have you come across organizations who are struggling to pay volunteers travel expense upfront because of the cost of living crisis? A lot of volunteers aren't able to travel to volunteer. What are your views around travel expenses is what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I don't have any, I don't know of any organizations that are struggling with that, but I think I've also seen the bit in the time well spent research that goes into this specific topic, where it's increasingly becoming more difficult for people that the cost of living crisis prohibits them from actually volunteering. But in my experience, I cannot. I will share the link to the report later on, but that is as far as my personal experience goes. But perhaps Liel has something to add to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or remarks? All right. I see an example from Christine, Food Cycle. You want to tell something about that example? I'm opening up the website right now.
Just that they have quite a flex. I mean, they're our classic flex. If we want to demonstrate flexibility, in the past, that's been the group we've gone to, because they basically have a shift system online, and you sign up to the shift. And their focus has often been students and younger people, so they were kind of ahead of the trend, really. They, you can do the train if you're helping with the cooking, you can do your hygiene certificate online, and then go ahead and get involved with the cooking. So they've made it very, very flexible and accessible for people.
Yeah, I love these examples. another one comes to mind that I will share. I think it's similar. It's Lasagna Love. I shared a link popped it in the chat, where you can start making lasagna for people in the neighborhood. And I think this is what people have already been doing. So if you're able to facilitate this and support it, that's great. Donica.
Hi, yeah. So my name is Donica. I'm manager in Galway Volunteer Centre in the west of Ireland. I suppose first of all, just to say it's so great to be able to come to this. I've been working in a volunteer centre since 2006, and I think it's the first time I've ever been in a room with people who weren't from Ireland talking about this. So it's great to be able to do that. So the thing that I was most interested in there was the idea of the Volunteer Academy. It's something that we've over the years tried to figure out how to do. So it's just really interesting to see that, and I'll just be following up on that just to see how it's done and how it's just the realities of doing it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in the UK yet. So I only have the Dutch examples, but I will share them later on. So they already provided many pieces of training and guidance and support, and they chose to offer that on a single place, much like a help center, which also involves articles, policies, and really provide a dedicated place to showcase this. And this has been a great way in also involving and engaging more and more volunteers, because you're able to show the amount of support that you offer. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if it will be the same in the UK, but we found our service, I suppose originally we were kind of like a recruitment agency, but we've actually become more of a volunteer management service ourselves. We have our own big group of volunteers. So even something to do internally for our own volunteers, it's something that we'd be looking at. It's just great to see that somebody else has done it and succeeded as well.
Yeah. Mira, yeah.
So Donna, previously, I think we used to have, many years back, they used to have the Mentoring and Befriending Foundation, as well as IAG services, which used to offer training for volunteers. Sadly, all of them lost their funding. And when Levi was talking about this volunteer academy, I don't know, the issues we have right now is around funding. The training providers, some of them have disappeared after COVID because they can't sustain themselves. So, but it's a fantastic idea to, as a sub-region, if you can run some academies, which will encourage more people to come and look at it in a different perspective. Like volunteering is something which can, because most of them are looking at gaining experience, and that's what they all the time. And as you rightly pointed out, we seem to be like a recruitment agency, you know. So it's a very good point, which Levi was mentioning about this volunteer academy. But is how, whether we have the resource as volunteer centers where we are like down to 1 or 2 staff managing a whole host of brokerage. This is the issue which I think currently we are all experiencing, because we can't reinvent the wheel all the time, because we have been asked to do that, but with no funding, you know. So
no, yeah, I think that is an excellent point, and we've been dreaming about a future in where we can just collaborate even more. So it doesn't make sense to create hundreds of different volunteer academies all stating roughly the same things. So if you can pool these resources and not reinvent the wheel in that sense, I think that would be a big step towards also making it more inclusive and accessible, because people just have one way or like a couple of ways to receive that training and support, and you're also better able to update it as you go to keep it up to date. Also the example from Laura, she's working with Voluntary Norfolk, great example of the Norfolk volunteer passport training, where they introduce people to volunteering and it's also an example of a guided journey, I think, which is amazing to see. So I think this also shows that within like one really short session, we've already been able to list many examples of how organizations already tap into these trends. So we're not just acknowledging the fact that there is a trend that we see and we'll just let it happen, but we've also seen ways in which organizations are versatile enough and efficient enough to jump on this new trend. So we'll also spend the time on making sure that you are, we'll send over all of the links in that presentation. If you ever want to know, like, do you know an example of this, then do reach out because we're always happy to make introductions. Because even with the research that I've done, and I think I've spent around 8 hours for this session, and I've already discovered many examples where I didn't even know they existed. And I'm like, oh, there's so much cool stuff going on. And here we are always with the doom and gloom reports, like, oh, the amount of volunteers declining, but there's a lot of stuff happening. Mira?
Just wanted to ask you, like you mentioned in one of your slides about sharing your platform with big local and that sort of thing in one of your slides. So some of us have got our own database and things like that. Previously, we used to be on the Do It. Sadly, all of us have disintegrated and managing our own database. Can we link up our platform to our database or the net to your platform? Is it possible? Or
yeah, that is possible. So that is the future that we view. So you have these national databases of volunteering, like in Ireland you have iVol, you have Volunteer Scotland, you have Do It. And I think when we started out as DeepMap, we started out the same way. So we had this national database, but then we had regional organizations saying, well, you're doing exactly what we do, but then we know our communities. So we said, we'll flip the model. So we provide regional platforms and we connect them to the greater whole. So you could, for example, you would have regional opportunities, connect your platform to the bigger county, to the west of England, for example, or you can showcase a subset of activities. So during Trustees Week, you can come up and combine all of the great trustee roles that you see in the region, as usually these are also suitable opportunities to do remotely. So this is the future that we see, and that why we exist as DeepMap, because this is what we want to facilitate in terms of technology. So this is not to promote what we do as the best way ever, but this is how we view it. And I think the future will be much more about connection and collaboration, because now we have 250 CVSs all doing the same thing. And we have thousands and thousands of charities and nonprofits also going after the same volunteers. And I think this is not sustainable for a longer period of time. Yeah, no worries, Sarah. We'll send over the recording for all of you. So with 6 minutes left, the floor is still open for any questions or remarks, or we can leave it at this, but that is up to you. All right, then a big thank you from my side for you to attend live. I understand it's a busy time in terms of planning and impact reports and securing new funding. Kudos for you that you could make it. And then I think towards the future, stay tuned for new sessions. We're taking a small break. So we've done sessions on corporate volunteering, impact measurement, trends. And in the new year, we'll also start diving into new topics, an inclusive approach to volunteering, more and more examples of skills-based. That is a big thing. So we're also happy to be sharing that info later on. So perhaps until next time, and we'll speak soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.